It's that time of year again, boys and girls. One of my favourite times of year. The hype is building for the new Formula One season, and of course, in honour of that, I'm going to be doing my Formula One 2019 predictions, and I'm not gonna lie. This is only the second year I've done it, but it is so difficult. It's a little bit unbelievable. At the front, we've got the top teams that are going to be even closer than ever, and I think apart from those top teams, the midfield scrap is just going to be the rest of the teams. I really do. There's no one that is cut and dry in a particular position this year. It's all change all over the grid. And I think, as you will see in my predictions, there's some I've gone a little bit rogue. Not as rogue as last year. I know that was a very long time ago I did last year's predictions. Well, obviously it was a year, but I mean, in terms of my channel, that was one of the very first videos I did. So that was very crazy at the time. I got my predictions very wrong last year. I'll be very clear about that. I did not do great last year, so I've calmed myself down a little bit over these 12 months, and yes, there's some crazy picks in there, I'm not going to lie, but I still believe I have reason to back up all of my answers, and I have put thought into this. I haven't just thrown these just onto a canvas and say, this team, Mercedes last, Ferrari fifth. I haven't done that sort of thing, but there are some teams that I think that will spark up some debate, so I'd love it if you could, before you start the video properly, head down to the comments section, just throw in maybe one or two predictions of your own. I know I've asked you on the comments section and the community page over on YouTube, and loads of you have given some brilliant predictions. I've even seen someone say Williams as best of the rest, and so many of you, I think a majority of you, are predicting that Sebastian Vettel is going to be this year's world champion. So what do I have to say? What are my thoughts? It's about time we finally dive in to my Formula One 2019 predictions. So then, let's start off with the Constructors. I did this last year. I do the whole Constructors Championship, and then I do the drivers afterwards. So starting off then in 10th place. Yeah, I've gone with Toro Rosso. Same as last year, in fact. And if you guys did see on Chamber F1's YouTube channel, I did a little video with him, Sean and Jonty as well. We all helped out with that and did a predictions challenge. And one of the questions we were given then was, who do you think is going to finish dead last? And I did go Toro Rosso, and part of the reason for this is mainly because I think the other teams around Toro Rosso from the previous season, I think, are going to move forward. So I think McLaren will move forward in terms of their pace from last year, and I think Williams will as well. And with Toro Rosso this week coming out and saying that they're more than happy to be cannon fodder for Red Bull, they're more than happy to do that, which is a real shame. It is a real shame, but I do think that's going to be the case. Looking at their driver lineup, it's not the worst on the grid. It is not the worst on the grid, though. Now thinking about it, I'm not too sure who I would give the worst driver lineup on the grid to, but it's a solid lineup. Danny Kvyat is returning. He's going to be under immense pressure. You're about to see some footage from when I went to Silverstone in 2017, but he is known as a torpedo, so he's going to have to calm his act down a little bit. But also Alex Albon coming in, I think, does not deserve enough credit, considering that he did almost beat Lando Norris in Formula 2 last year, and I think he's going to be a really interesting driver to watch. So Toro Rosso's at the bottom of the pile for me. We'll talk about the drivers a little bit later on. 9th place, I have gone with Williams, so nothing too crazy for Williams, only one place above where they finished last year. I think they've got a really good lineup actually this year in George Russell and Robert Kubica, both with completely different dynamics to most drivers on the rest of the grid, in fact. So we've got Russell, who's coming in as a Mercedes young driver. Not only is he looking to prove himself for Mercedes, but with Esteban Ocon without a seat, he's trying to almost overtake him in the Mercedes pecking order. And then obviously the incredible story of Robert Kubica getting an injury in the Rally Car Series in 2011, not driving in Formula One since 2010, and in the past couple of years he's really created this fairy tale, if you will, and has worked his way back into Formula One for next season. And being an ex-Kubica fan, I'm really excited to see him. I think these two are going to be really close, and this analogy is going to get some people upset, but I think it's going to be similar to Stroll and Sorokin. I think they're both miles better than Stroll and Sorokin, but I think in the fact that it's going to be really hard to tell week in, week out who's going to be the number one out of the two of them. And I'd love Williams to be much higher up the grid. And as well, they're going to be working with Paddy Lowe. This is Paddy Lowe's first real attempt at a Williams F1 car, and I'm hoping that they're the sort of team that really could, well, benefit from the big regulation changes with the front wing. And I think Paddy Lowe could do a really good job there. So I'm hoping Williams I could be wrong with, and I'm hoping they could be a little bit higher up, but it was hard to really push them any higher up the grid. I'm not going to lie, it really was. Mainly just looking at last year, how bad they were. It's unexpected that they're going to make a big jump. But I will say, as I always say, look out for a major livery change from Williams. They've lost their Martini sponsorship, and they've got a new company from Poland coming in who are sporting red logos and red branding. So don't be surprised if we see a white and red Williams on the grid next year. But ninth place, I think, is a fair enough shout for Williams. Right then, let's move on to 8th place. And again, nothing too crazy. I mean, McLaren, it's going to be a difficult season for them. It is. We saw last year, and I think we all expected, including myself, and if any of you can remember my prediction for McLaren last year, I've definitely calmed that down a hell of a lot. But look, they've got a good lineup as well. Again, it's not the best on the grid. Carlos Sainz is going to be a solid midfield driver, and I think he's the perfect fit for McLaren right now. And Norris is an up-and-coming talent. I don't think he's as good as George Russell. But at the same time, some drivers jump into a Formula 1 car and they just instantly change. I mean, Sergei Sorokin was an average Formula 2 driver, but he quite impressed me in Formula 1. So some drivers make that switch really well. Charles Leclerc even struggled early doors and then really pushed on. So Norris has got a nice, I suppose, grounding team. No one's going to expect him to be in the points every weekend. But if I'm being totally honest, I think McLaren are finally coming to this realisation that this isn't going to be a 1 year they just suddenly back at the front. I think honestly that's been their mentality for all these years. Because every year we hear that, oh yeah, this is going to be the year that we're back at the front on the podium. And it's never happened. And I think this year they're finally being, well, realistic about it. And they're saying, look, we're going to have to rebuild this team. And this might be a 5 to 10 year project. And I think, yeah, that is definitely true. So I feel a little bit disappointed in myself that I've put McLaren 8th. But looking at where they finished last year, I think it's hard to say they're really going to be, even a podium potential finisher. I really do. And if you think as well that Fernando Alonso has been dragging that car for the past 3 or 4 years, I mean, you've got to say Sainz and Norris are not going to be of the level of Fernando Alonso. So it's not looking great for McLaren. Although what I will say is the fact they struggled at the end suggests they moved to next year's car early. So I will look out for that. But the first shock of the video, well, I suppose it could be considered a shock. I'm going with Racing Point or Force India, as they were previously known. They finished 7th at the end of last season. They were actually a team I was able to predict correctly last year, but I was obviously massively helped out by the summer changes with the whole administration that the team went into, that they had to be rescued by Lawrence Stroll and his consortium of business boys and girls. So I think that's one of the big factors in all of this, because obviously there's going to be so much money being pumped into the team at the moment, and a team that's been, I suppose, fighting for best of the rest now for several years. Why would they now go, in theory, backwards when all this money's coming in? And my main theory behind this is that you think in the summertime, in Formula 1, most of the teams have got, development of their next year's car underway. But Force India had no money to even sort out this year's car. So I'm thinking, surely they're not going to be able to get right on the pace for next year's car. The last time we saw this, or this kind of event, was Lotus in 2015. So they ran out of money come Spa in 2015. They flukily got on the podium in that particular race, but for the rest of the year they really fell off the pace. They got bought out by Renault. Obviously, Renault pumped in loads of money, but because Lotus in the previous year hadn't been able to develop a car, they slumped right to the back of the grid, did Renault. And I know in theory it was their first year, but I can see a similar thing happening with Racing Point. Again, I've not put them in the back of the grid. I've put them 7th, which again is the same as this year. And I just think there's going to be tears, even with the dynamic of Perez and Stroll. I think that's not going to work, and I think there will be a change come the end of the year. So Force India, aka Racing Point, is a team to look out for. Now 6th, I've gone with Sauber. Now, I didn't think I'd be doing this because I personally think a lot of people are overhyping Sauber. Obviously, my boy Kimi Räikkönen is heading over to Sauber this year, and Antonio Giovinazzi will do his first full season in Formula 1. So, all change at Sauber. At the end of last year, you could argue their car was best of the rest. And if they worked their strategy a little bit better in Abu Dhabi, a podium may have been on the cards for Charles Leclerc. So, overall, I think they've got a better lineup this year than last year. I do believe that because Marcus Ericsson, bless him, he was an okay driver, but I think Raikkonen and Giovinazzi are better than him. I definitely think Leclerc is better than both Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, but at the same time, I think that's going to be a solid grounding for both Raikkonen, who I think is really going to have a chance to scrap it out in the midfield, which we all want to see him being able to do that. And I think Giovinazzi now has something to prove. And I think he's going to be quick. And I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. And as well, I think we've seen Sauber develop in this year alone. At the beginning of the year, they couldn't get out of Q1, couldn't get in the points. And at the end of the year, if they weren't in the final set of qualifying, if they weren't best of the rest, we were all surprised. So I'm hoping they continue that into next year. This Ferrari partnership seems to be getting stronger and stronger. And really, they are developing into this Ferrari B team officially almost now. So, I think it's going to work really well. Also reports that Maurizio Arriva-Bene could go there. I don't believe that myself. I think Frederick Vasseur is doing a really good job there. And there's no need to change that around. So, Sauber, I think they'd be chuffed with 6th place. I really do. And of course, there's loads of questions. Will either of their drivers get a podium? I know loads of people would love to see Kimi Räikkönen get on the podium for Sauber. I can see it happening if there's a really carnage race, but apart from that, I don't think on pure pace they will quite be able to do so. Let's move into the top 5 then, and okay, I've gone with Haas for 5th place, and I imagine a lot of people are going to call bias, and it's, well, they're probably right. No, let's look at the facts then. So last year, I thought Haas were going to be dead last. I really did. I thought they'd be right at the back with Toro Rosso. They blew everyone away. And how are they able to do that? Well, if you look at the car on screen there, they pretty much copied last year's Ferrari. So part of me thinks, well, surely they're just going to do that again, right? Surely, if they're sensible, they will just ignore the critics once again, build a solid car that's similar to the Ferrari, and get up the front again. And I can see it happening. I can. Again, I think they got a solid lineup. And I'm going to say this now while that image is on screen. Well, let's look at it properly. If Grosjean does crash every 5 races, or the first 5 races, he's caused an instance, I think they'll get rid of him. I do believe that. And I think they will look at the likes of Esteban Ocon, who's out of a seat, and say, look, we've got a spare seat here. Even though we got ties with Ferrari, we can get your boy in. I think they will do that. If Grosjean doesn't perform. I think he will perform. I do think he will. But I think now there is options like Ocon, even like Fernando Alonso, who could very well say, look, I'll have a few races in a midfield scrap. I mean, I think it could happen. So Haas have different options here and everywhere now. And so there is going to be pressure on Grosjean. And Magnussen as well, he calmed down so much in 2018. I think he'll be consistent once again. And I think if we look at the end of last year, Grosjean was outperforming Magnussen once he wasn't smashing into everyone. And Haas last year, being a Haas fan, looking at how they did some of their strategies, they need to clear that up. Because there were some awful decisions with strategy. Tyre management didn't help, but I still expect them to be up there fighting for the best of the rest. Oh my God, what does that say on screen? What did that just say on the screen? 4th place Red Bull. See, I was gonna build it up, but I thought, no, I'm just gonna have to throw it in your faces, aren't I? 4th place, I've gone with Red Bull. Now, keyboard warriors, do not worry. This is not an attack on Max Verstappen. It's not really an attack on Pierre Gasly. This is an attack on Honda. No, right, okay. First year, I've said this for quite some time now. First year with Honda, you're gonna have to have a meet and greet sort of session. And embedding themselves into the car process. And yes, they've been with Toro Rosso, but is that Toro Rosso anywhere near as good as that Red Bull? No, it's not. And have reports came out in the last week saying that Toro Rosso are willing to completely write off their season to help Red Bull. That suggests to me that there is issues with that Honda engine and getting it in the Red Bull. And as well, reliability. Yes, Honda were better last year, but their reliability wasn't. Yes, it was better than the McLaren situation, but still, there were a lot of issues. Come the end of the season, all of their engines were blowing up still. So, I can see that happening once again. And I want to make it clear as well, the team Red Bull I've got in 4th and the team I've got in 3rd, which you can probably guess, I think are going to be very close. I think it's going to be minimal points difference. I really do. I think they've got very similar talented lineups. I do believe that. I probably think of the 4, Max Verstappen is the best. I've said before, I think he's now in my top 3 drivers, maybe top 2 drivers on the grid, Max Verstappen. But I think, as you'll see in a second, the team in 3rd, I am just predicting to have that slightly better reliability. Because I think of the 2 cars, the Red Bull's going to be the quickest. And I think they might even challenge for a win. But that reliability issue for me is going to be the one. It's going to be the key in this fight. And I just have this funny feeling that in the first year of this partnership, it's not going to quite work out. Renault are in 3rd. I think that's pretty obvious. But again, I think on track, we're going to see the top 2 teams fighting out. Then Red Bull and then Renault on track most weekends. But, like I say, I think that reliability, I think Renault are always going to be there to pick up the pieces. Always. Because I think they're going to be comfortably in front of the rest of the field. Just behind Red Bull. So if there's any issues with Red Bull, they're going to be pouncing. Even if there's any issues with the top team, I think Renault are going to be the ones that will make this step up. I think, I didn't say this in Shane Bear's predictions, but I think both Renault drivers will be on the podium. That's just saying that off the cuff, but I do. I think all of the top 8 drivers will be on the podium this year, which is brilliant. And we may even see some fluky ones a little bit further down, but I think Hülkenberg will finally get it. I think Ricciardo will have a really solid season at Renault. I think he's looking for that new challenge, and I think he'll be up to the challenge. And I think he's going to be really feisty, fighting the likes of Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly. And again, I think this is Gasly's first real chance in a big team. So is he going to be able to fight off the likes of Hülkenberg, who I still think is one of the most underrated drivers on the grid? And is he going to be able to fend off the likes of Daniel Ricciardo? So there's obviously a lot of question marks, but this was my big one that I put Renault in 3rd. What an incredible achievement that would be. And as you will see in my drivers' predictions a little bit in a minute, I haven't put any of those drivers in a position that you'd expect them to be 3rd in the Constructors, but I really do think reliability is going to be a big thing for Red Bull. We saw Daniel Ricciardo this year with a Renault engine, which in theory has better reliability. He had, 7 retirements, and that isn't including qualifying, so it's going to be a crazy one. But this was my real outsider prediction. And I have a funny and gut feeling that this could be how it swings in the championship. But top 2 then, who am I going to go with? And second place, I have gone with Ferrari. And not for the reason you're about to see on screen there. I think Vettel is not going to be as, I was going to say bad as this season, but he did get second in the championship, but he did make a lot of mistakes. I think Enzo Benito becoming the new team principal is a really sensible move. Not the timing of it, I think that was a silly decision, but I think in the long term that is going to be good for the team, and I think, as we all know, Charles Leclerc is going to be an incredible talent this year, and it's going to be a mega scrap with Sebastian Vettel. It really is, and it was for that reason I think Mercedes are going to get it. I mean, it's obvious that Mercedes, they're the only team left. Spoilers. But I think that Ferrari like a 1 and a 2. Vettel in particular likes being in a team with a 1 and a 2. So what happens in the first 3 races, say, Vettel comfortably beats Leclerc, but then what happens if Leclerc starts beating Vettel? How does the dynamics shift then? Because if Leclerc is then out-qualifying him, say, do the team say, whoa, but Vettel's our number 1, we were going to give our championship charge to him, now what do we do? I think it's going to be a similar situation to McLaren in 2007, where they had the best car, but Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton couldn't get on, caused all this chaos, and ultimately Raikkonen just pipped them both to the championship by 1 point. And I sort of think it's going to be that sort of dynamic. I really do. I really think, and I've said this a few times, again, I have this gut feeling that we're going to get to Abu Dhabi and there's going to be a 3-way title fight. Maybe even a 4-way title fight. I really can see it happening this year because I do think Mercedes and Ferrari, with Red Bull dropping back a little bit with that Honda engine, I think they're going to be the top every time. And if we do get a surprise winner, it's going to be because there's a 4-way crash at the front. I think that's definitely going to be the case. But as I say, I think Mercedes will be the champions. And for reasons that I just mentioned with Ferrari, I just think Mercedes are just going to have that edge on consistency. Bottas will, I was going to say improve, but if I think Bottas can keep his pace that he had at the beginning or the first half of last year, they should be fine. And he should be in that title fight. It's just at the end of last year, he was so worn down after, well, team orders in Germany, team orders in Russia. That was the big kick in the teeth, that one. And I think he just thought, well, there's no real point anymore for this season. We got the constructors now. I'm just ready for next year. And I think he was so deflated that I think this year he can only improve. And I think he will improve. Because I think people forget this. And I think people in Formula 1 a lot of the time are maybe a little bit short-minded sometimes. But please, if you disagree with me, put it down in the comments below. But think back to 2014, 2015, 2016 Valtteri Bottas, when everyone was begging him to be in a Mercedes, begging that he should be in a top team because he was such a brilliant driver. And he was. And I don't think that Valtteri's gone anywhere. I think he's still in there. I think we just need to see him really go for it now. And I think he'll do well. And I think Lewis Hamilton, he's really, I think he's got these 7 championships on his mind now. That goal is in sight. And I tell you, I find it crazy that at the end of this year, if he wins the championship, he's got 6, and he's 1 off Schumacher's record, which that's still a little bit mind-boggling to say. I'm not going to lie, it still messes with my head a little bit. But I think, like I say, Mercedes, they haven't really changed a lot this year. Ferrari, new team principal, new dynamic with Leclerc. I think for the first year, Mercedes are going to have that edge but it's going to be close. And we're not talking a runaway Constructors Championship, winning that early doors. No. That is going to be won on the last race. But let's go on to the Drivers' Championship then. We'll go through this a little bit quicker because obviously there's 20 drivers. And in 20th place, I've gone with Daniel Kvyat. Now, apart from the fact I have always really struggled to say his name, I just think that Toro Rosso's not going to have the pace. And I think there is going to be loads of reliability issues for them. I really do see that. And I think of Albon and Kvyat, I can just see Albon edging it. I really can, but I think it's going to be a difficult year for both the Toro Rosso boys. And as you're about to see, it doesn't change much for 19th place either. Because in 19th, I've put Alex Albon. Like I say, I think, I said this last year, to be fair, I thought Toro Rosso would be all at their own at the back. And in the second race, Pierre Gasly managed to pick up that 4th place. But I think Albon does have the edge of the two, and I don't think they're going to be miles away from the Williams boys. But I think if I'm really looking at it on paper, they're going to have to hope for some carnage results and some fluky results if they really want to push up the championship. Now, 18th place is going to upset some people, and I have put Robert Kubica. Yes, of the 2 Williams boys, I've just put him into 2nd place. And I think as the season goes on, with his injuries, I think he might struggle later into the season when it gets more tiring. And I think George Russell's going to keep up his pace at a more consistent rate across the season. And in races like Singapore, where even drivers like Lewis Hamilton say they struggle, I question whether Kubica will as well. But I hope I'll be proved wrong. 17th place, a little bit surprisingly, is Lando Norris. Why have I put Norris there? I think, like I say, I mentioned it earlier, I think Russell is better than Norris, and thus I have put Russell higher than Lando Norris. And I think McLaren, again, won't be too far off the Williams. I think they're really now realising, as I mentioned earlier, that this is a rebuilding process, and they can't just throw and make changes all the time. They're going to have to be consistent. So I think the next few years they're going to be stable, and as you can see, I've only just put Russell in front of Lando Norris, and I think they'll both be very close in their first season of Formula 1, which I think is going to be brilliant to watch. I really do. The rivalry from Formula 2, I think it's going to eke its way into Formula 1, and Albon as well isn't that far away from him, so it's brilliant to see last year's top 3 in Formula 2, I think are going to be fighting out this year in Formula 1, and I just see Russell getting a crazy result somewhere that's really going to elevate him up the table. Carlos Sainz in 16th place, again, not really a huge surprise looking where I put Lando Norris. Again, I think he's the better of the two drivers, and I think it'd probably be quite a shame to see Carlos Sainz this far down. I can see him getting in the points on several occasions, I really do, and I think such is the way of the midfield this season that there's not really going to be any runaway teams except from those top 4 teams, so I can see a few points here and there. Oh dear. Oh dear, that wasn't expected. Sergio Perez in 14th, which I think a lot of you have noticed, is behind his teammate Lance Stroll. The reasoning behind this particular one is that Force India, or Racing Point now, is Stroll's team. And there is going to be fireworks between him and Perez. And if Perez doesn't follow team orders, he is going to be out that door because he is not the team leader anymore. Lance Stroll, his teammate, I've put just one place in front of him because I think, again, money aside, I think Lance Stroll is a good driver. I don't think he's as good as Perez, but I think Perez still has that little bit of a temper, and the fact he didn't get on with Esteban Ocon makes me 100% sure he's going to struggle to get on with Lance Stroll. So I think that dynamic is really going to spice up the season in the midfield, and I think for Racing Point, Perez will probably be gone at the end of the year if he doesn't really comply with the team. 12th place, I have gone with Antonio Giovinazzi. Again, Sauber I think will do really well this year. And just to let you know, the top 10 boys and girls, well, boys they are this year in Formula 1, I have gone into a little bit more detail. But 12th place Giovinazzi, again I think Sauber will do well. I think Giovinazzi won't do as good as Kimi Räikkönen, but again I think it will be fairly close between the two of them, but I still think Kimi, a little bit like earlier I said with George Russell, may be able to get a fluky result here or there. And the final person outside of the top 10, I have gone with Kevin Magnussen, mainly based on the fact that I think, looking at his form at the end of last season, I think that may continue into this season, and as you all know, I quite like his teammate Romain Grosjean. I think he'll just have the edge over the entire season, unless, of course, as I mentioned earlier, he has a crazy carnage season for whatever reason and decides to be a 2012 Romain Grosjean again like he was last season. Right then, 10th place. Do not worry, I've not done a crazy bias with Romain Grosjean. He's in 10th place. I think it'll be very close with Kevin Magnussen. I think they're really well-suited teammates. I do believe that. I think they're both on a similar level in terms of pace. Grosjean prefers to crash. Kevin Magnussen decides to move several times in the braking zone. So they've both got their faults. But as I say, I think on his day, Grosjean is the better driver of the two. He's the better qualifier. He did out-qualify Magnussen last year. And I think has done every single year he has been at Haas. And obviously there is that one big fault Grosjean had last year, which was the fact he decided to crash out at every single event at the beginning of the season. And that will be ironed out. I'm 99% sure of that. And as I mentioned again, I'll keep saying it because I really don't want it to come across that I'm only putting him there because he's my favourite driver of all the drivers. I think if he doesn't get his act together, he will be out because there is other options. So 9th place, I have gone with someone I think will make you guys quite happy, and that is Kimi Räikkönen. So I mentioned that I think the top 8 drivers will all come from the top 8, or the top 4 teams, sorry. So it's no surprise that we've seen Kimi Räikkönen in 9th, but maybe it is. Maybe you are surprised that I put him as the almost de facto best of the rest. I think he's going to have a really good year, Kimi Räikkönen. I think this is the challenge he's been waiting for, because at the front he's played this second fiddle. He's played this number 2 driver, and even the fighting at the front is maybe 1 or 2 overtakes in the whole race. And I think that's something he's really going to excel at. And I think as well at the front, he was aware that he had to just pick up points. That was his role. Whereas I think in Sauber, he knows he's got a very different role to play. And I'd like to think we're going to see a little bit more of an aggressive Kimi Räikkönen. This is probably wishful thinking, in a sense. I'm not going to lie. There are people that think he'll retire at the end of this season. But I can see him doing the 2 years at Sauber. And I can see him doing particularly well and finishing in 9th place. Now from the top 4 teams, in 8th place, probably, again, a little bit surprisingly, I've gone with Pierre Gasly. I'm sure I can already see people getting upset with me putting Red Bull in 4th, and I think that's fair enough, and I do think it's going to be very close. I think out of Verstappen and Gasly, Verstappen's the best driver. I don't think I know many people that would argue that whatsoever. And again, I said earlier, I think reliability is really going to hit hard with Honda and Red Bull. A couple of years down the line, yeah, I can see them fighting for titles, and I can see Red Bull picking up a couple of wins this year. I can see that happening, but at the same time, I think Gasly will struggle against his teammate, and I really can't say it enough. I think the first year you have to give them time to embed themselves, and I think in the first few races we might see a really difficult start to that partnership, which I don't want to see. I really don't, but I think Gasly, even himself, he's got a big jump up this year in only his 2nd full year of Formula 1. It's going to be an interesting one to watch, but he is in 8th place for me. In 7th place, he's not Max Verstappen, so don't worry, boys and girls. It is Nico Hülkenberg. Again, I think he's going to be really close with Gasly, really close with Verstappen, really close with Daniel Ricciardo. I think they're all going to be bunched up in that midfield, but I think Ricciardo just has the edge on, for me, on Nico Hülkenberg, mainly because of his crazy moves that we see. Because I think in terms of qualifying pace, they're going to be very close. Maybe Hülkenberg might have the edge in terms of qualifying pace. That's going to be a really fun one to see. He's got the pace, he's consistent in Formula 1. He doesn't get best of the rest last year for no reason, and I think he had 7 retirements last year and still was best of the rest. So this guy definitely knows how to drive a Formula 1 car. He will be on the podium. I'm almost certain of that now. And again, I think he will be the team leader. I don't think they're really going to have big favourites in this team, and I think they will let them fight it out. I think they'll be fair, but I don't think they'll be a strict, regimented team, I suppose, like Ferrari, where there's no fighting. So that's what I've gone with in 7th. In 6th place, I've gone with his teammate, Daniel Ricciardo, who on screen there, for any new Formula 1 fans, he's moved to Renault this season, so he's wearing a Red Bull outfit there, so sorry if that's a little bit of a pain. But no, he's going to be Hülkenberg's teammate for this year, and then again, I think he'll just have the edge, and I think he'll be more consistent than Gasly, who I think he's going to have the reliability issues. But again, I think Verstappen's going to have the edge in all 3 of them. I do. I really think Verstappen's going to have a good year, and again, I think he's just going to be held back by issues with that Honda engine. But I think his pace is going to be up there, and I think he will get a couple of wins. Ricciardo, on the other hand, I can see getting a couple of podiums. Because like I mentioned, if, Ferrari or Mercedes, either of those 2 boys, have grid penalties or engine failures during qualifying, I can see Renault, in particular races, being the team that's going to be able to pick up the pieces. So Ricciardo, I can see doing particularly well, making benefits from other people's misfortunes. 5th place then, the top 5 in the championship. And again, I don't think it's a surprise who I've put in 5th place. It is the Flying Dutchman, the Orange Army hero, Max Verstappen. As I just mentioned there, I think he's going to be very close between the 2 Red Bull drivers and the 2 Renault drivers. Verstappen, even with reliability issues, I think will have the edge. I think he'll be in the podium multiple times this year. And I think he will win also multiple times this year. I think a lot of people in the comments, I think a few of you will say Verstappen to be world champion. I do believe that, because even my predictions all depend on Honda engines. It really does, because I even think a lot of the team battles, most of you will have agreed with me. Maybe not Force India, but I think most of you will have. But it all depends on the Honda engine. It does. But I think Max Verstappen in 5th place is a popular choice between a lot of people. And I think he's going to have another brilliant season. And I think he's going to be probably one of the standout drivers of the year. The top 4 then. This is going to be one of the craziest top 4s ever. And I think most people have this in a crazy order. But I have gone with... Wow, okay. After my little poll I did, this is the person that you will put as your world champion. So why have I put him in 4th place? I rate Sebastian Vettel very highly. And I can't stress enough, Abu Dhabi is going to be a 3 or 4 way title fight. It is. You'll come back to this video in 6 or 7 months' time and you're going to say, yeah, Dan, you were right. This has been a crazy year and it is to choose between any of them. But again, I can't stress enough that this is going to be all change at Ferrari, and I don't think it's going to be a change that is going to be to Sebastian Vettel's liking, because he loves to be a number one driver. His 4 World Championships came as a clear number one driver at Red Bull, and at Ferrari at the last 2 years where he hasn't been able to pick up the title, he's been a clear number one driver. Now that dynamic changes. And I think, again, like I mentioned, you think back to 2007, Hamilton, Alonso in the best car on the grid. If they weren't able to do it, I cannot see Leclerc and Vettel in this harmonious partnership. Even Daniel Ricciardo, the nicest guy on the grid, couldn't even make it work as a teammate with Sebastian Vettel because Vettel couldn't deal under that pressure. And again, I don't think he'll be the Vettel of last year, making all those mistakes, but I just think behind closed doors, the issues that's going to be at Ferrari in this first year of big change is going to hurt Sebastian Vettel. I really do believe that. And I think the 3 in front of him will be more consistent, and I think his teammate will be, well, I actually think his teammate will get preferential treatment come the end of the season. I can see that happening, and I can see this being a very similar situation to 2014 Red Bull when Vettel and Ricciardo were there together. I really can see it being that sort of situation. Give Leclerc 5 races, he's going to be on the pace, and I think it's going to be fireworks at Ferrari. 3rd place then. Am I going to go crazy again? That is the question mark. Not too crazy. I've gone with Valtteri Bottas. I really wanted to put him higher. And again, I can see this guy being in the title fight for the majority of the season. But I think Mercedes will be sensible, sort out a deal with Valtteri that says almost, we'll take you for that extra year if you accept this number 2 driver role. I can see that happening because I think Ferrari will have the best car on paper again. I think they did last year, and I think they'll have it again this year. But I think Mercedes still, structurally, in that team, understand that to win the championship, both championships, you need team orders. And arguably, yes, they didn't need them last year. But anything can happen in Formula 1. Anything can happen in Formula 1. You don't really see many people complaining about the team orders in Germany. So why do people complain about them in Russia? Again, that's probably a silly statement because they were different situations. But it was things like that that really helped the team win both championships. They didn't know Ferrari was just going to completely drop off the pace at the end of the year and Red Bull all of a sudden were going to come out of nowhere. They didn't know that. So I still stand by that it was sensible for Lewis Hamilton's championship hopes that they did that. It does make sense to me. But at the same time, I can see them doing it again if Ferrari are having these fireworks but still having the pace. I can see it happening. But again, I don't think... You think back to last year, Valtteri was behind the Red Bulls for a lot of the second half of the season. So I don't see that happening. I think he'll be consistent. I think he will pick up a couple of wins this year. He deserves to after the start of last year. And I actually think he's going to be the surprise of the season. Valtteri Bottas, I do. I do have a soft spot for him, but I think he's a much better driver than people give him credit for. Now, we're down to 2. We are down to 2. Who am I going to give it to? In 2nd place, it's Charles Leclerc. Okay, right. I'm sure a lot of you are a little bit surprised at me there. I have been raving about this guy for so long now, saying he's going to be world champion this year. But when I sat down and put pen to paper to write down who I had as my champion, Leclerc in his first year as Ferrari, again, I can see it going down to the wire. He is going to be in this title fight to the last race of the season. But, as mentioned with Vettel, that is going to be the big mistakes from Ferrari this year. I was going to say once again, but this is such a new dynamic for Ferrari. I think we're all surprised that Leclerc is going to be in it with Seb next year. But I think they're going to underestimate Leclerc. And even if they put him as a number 2, you can't put a star driver like Leclerc as a number 2 for that long. I mean, when Max Verstappen came to Red Bull, he probably was thought of as a number 2 for that first year. He goes and wins that first race in Spain, and all of a sudden, the dynamic completely changes. And I think Ferrari's undoing this year will be exactly that. And I can see Leclerc just missing out on the title, but I think it's going to be very close, and I think if you want to make a good bet, then I would probably put money on Leclerc, because the odds on that are going to be mega, and this guy is going to be a superstar, and he is going to be winning races. He's going to be brilliant this year. But as, well, I'm sure you've all guessed by now, my Formula 1 2019 World Champion is going to be Mr. Consistent, Lewis Hamilton. I mean, you just look at his stats last year, the most points ever for anyone in Formula 1. And if you think back to the beginning of his season, the first 4 races, I was convinced he was going to retire at the end of 2018. I thought, yeah, he's not feeling it this season. And what does he do? He gets that, I'm going to say, fluky win. Although I don't really like saying fluky, but I say it all the time. But he got that out of the ordinary win, we will say, and was able just to continue momentum from there, winning at races like Hungary, Singapore, where Ferrari should have won. Hamilton was able to dominate. And I think this year, he's going to have a number 2 driver come the end of the year. Even if Valtteri is trying to stick in there with the title, I think if Leclerc or Vettel is there fighting with Hamilton, Mercedes are not going to be daft. And they will give Hamilton number 1 status. And I think that, as I've mentioned many times today, I think that is going to be the difference between Mercedes and Ferrari. Come 2020, I'm not too sure if I'm going to have the same opinion, but I can see for 2019 Lewis Hamilton becoming a 6-time world champion and 1 step closer to Schumacher's record. I can imagine a lot of people will also agree with me that Hamilton will be a world champion, but I also have seen throughout the past few weeks Hamilton, Leclerc and Vettel all have equal amount of votes for world champion for 2019, and I'd love to know who you think is going to be the world champion. So in the right hand corner, the top right hand corner of this video, there should be a little poll that you'll be able to vote in who you think is going to be world champion, and there should be a little list of drivers who I think is going to be most likely. I'll most likely do my top 5 drivers and I'll throw them up there, and I want to see who you guys think will be champion. I'd love to know your thoughts on my prediction as well as some of your own predictions in the comments below. You can even do your whole grid if you'd like. I'd love to see that, and as always, in the first 24 hours I'm almost guaranteed to respond to your comments, and I will do most likely if they are later as well. Thank you guys for watching. As always, it's been a long one, so thank you for sticking with it. I'm surprised you have. I always say this, but it's been a long one, so hopefully your ears are not bleeding from listening to my voice for about 45 minutes. If you guys love Formula 1 or Formula E, I do both on this channel. Hopefully Formula E doesn't put you off like many people it does. But Formula 1 content for 2019 will be kicking up once again at the moment. I've got loads of videos planned on lots of different topics covering the 2019 season. So if you're looking forward to 2019, hit that like button. And if you enjoy 2019 content for Formula 1, hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.